Hey, what's up everyone? Zach D Productions here, and I'm here with a list video for you guys. So for this list, I'll be going over the top 5 worst films in a particular franchise, and that franchise is Godzilla. Now, a lot of you may know that I am a big Godzilla fan. I love Godzilla. Godzilla is definitely one of my all-time favorite franchises. And I would say Godzilla himself is one of my favorite characters just ever. So I'm a big Godzilla fan, so unfortunately I do have to talk about some of the worst movies in the Godzilla franchise. Now, even though these 5 films I would say are the worst Godzilla movies, at least in my opinion, I still think that there are, for the most part, things to like about them. And honestly, there's only really one Godzilla movie, just one out of how many Godzilla movies, like over 40, that I would say is arguably straight up bad. But again, arguably, it's debatable for sure. And that will, of course, come in last on this list. So let's go ahead and get started with what I believe are the worst Godzilla movies. Keep in mind, this is just based on my opinion. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start off this list with Shin Godzilla. And with saying that, I still think that this movie has some things to like in it, particularly the scenes with Godzilla. Definitely the best parts about this movie, mainly the scenes with Godzilla. Now, the way Godzilla looks in this movie, the design of Godzilla, yes, it is definitely one of the weaker Godzilla designs, at least based off my opinion. I mean, if you like the design, to each his own, more power to you, as they say. But I was never really the biggest fan of this particular Godzilla design. It's not very Godzilla-like. I mean, this is definitely the scariest Godzilla has ever looked. And I think many would agree on that. I mean, you could argue that the design is unique. It's something different, yes. So, I mean, I guess I can give it points for that, for at least, being something different. But it's definitely one of the weaker designs, at least based off my opinion. The destruction scenes, not so bad. I mean, yes, there are some CGI that just doesn't look the greatest, but it's not terrible either. Now, my biggest problem with this movie is the human scenes. They're extremely boring. I mean, this movie honestly has some of the most boring human character scenes in any of the Godzilla movies. They're just really boring, and they really drag on. I mean, they really could have cut some of those scenes short, and the movie probably would have been a lot better, I would say. And I will say that the way that the film was directed is very unique as well. Like, you get all these different camera angles. Like, it has a really unique directing style to it. So, they're experimenting, they're doing stuff different, but it just, I don't know. I think it's just the way that it was done. It just didn't really nail it for me. But again, there are still things to like about it. There still are good things to like about this movie. But all in all, I would still say it's one of the weaker Godzilla movies. And honestly, you could probably live without seeing this one. So next, we got Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, also known as Ibira, Horror of the Deep. And this is, of course, an earlier Godzilla film. And I think of this era, this is maybe one of the weaker ones of this particular era. And I think the reason I say that is because I think that this is one of the more forgettable Godzilla movies of this era. But still, not a bad movie. It's definitely not bad. But again, it's just a little forgettable in my opinion. Now, Ibira, not one of the more recognizable or memorable villains. You could say the villain is one of the complaints I do have. Not one of the more memorable villains, I would say. But still, it is what it is. There's still things to like about it. So, yeah. But I think of this era, it's one of the weaker films. Again, my main issue with this film is it's just rather forgettable. So, Ibira, Horror of the Deep. So next, we got Godzilla 1998. Now, I know there's a lot of Godzilla fans that would say that this is the worst Godzilla movie ever made. While I would agree it is one of the worst, to say that it's the absolute worst, I don't think so. Especially with what I'm going to talk about last in this video. Like, did you guys forget that that movie existed, you know? But Godzilla 98, it is, of course, the first American Godzilla film. And it does star Matthew Broderick, who does pretty good in this movie. But I know some people say that he was miscasted and everything. And of course, we do have to talk about the design of Godzilla in this movie as well. Definitely not very Godzilla. Very much like Shin Godzilla in that aspect where it just doesn't really ring Godzilla, if that makes sense. Although I feel like with this film, this is definitely the least like Godzilla when we're talking Godzilla himself on screen. Like, he's like a lot skinnier in this movie. He runs really fast and everything. I mean, it's a decent movie. It's more fun than anything. I mean, around this time, this is when Jurassic Park was very big, and you can tell. You can tell that, you know, they were just kind of going off of that, but still, it's more of a fun movie than anything. But it is one of the weaker Godzilla movies, or Zilla movies, as as a lot of people like to call this. A lot of people call this Zilla opposed to Godzilla because, well, it's not really like Godzilla. So Godzilla 98, you know what? I think it's decent. It's not the best, but it's not as bad as a lot of people make it sound. But again, it is one of the weaker Godzilla movies. So next, we have Godzilla 2014. I'm not sure how some people will feel about me having this movie on this list, but for me personally, when it comes to the MonsterVerse movies, this is the weakest film in the MonsterVerse, I would say. I know a lot of people would agree with me on that. This is, of course, the reboot. You know, it's basically the start of the MonsterVerse. I mean, it's crazy to think that, you know, at least in my opinion, that the first MonsterVerse movie is the worst MonsterVerse movie, you know? I mean, it would be like saying that the first Iron Man movie is the worst MCU movie. I mean, it's not. I'd say it's one of the best, but it's basically like saying that. So that's why it just feels kind of weird, because this is the start of the MonsterVerse. But with saying that, there are still things to like about this film. I mean, I do like the design of Godzilla in this film, which this is basically the core design that they stuck with throughout the entire MonsterVerse. And, you know, some of the scenes are pretty cool. I mean, you know, you got a decent cast in here. I know Elizabeth Olsen is in this movie. But I think this movie's biggest problem is it's kind of boring. And Godzilla doesn't really show up till, like, much later in the movie. You know? At least from what I remember. Like, you get, like, all these scenes that lead up to Godzilla, and it's just like, well, it's a bit too late for that. So, I don't know. I don't know what this movie could have done to make it better, but it's just kind of boring in comparison to a lot of the other Godzilla movies and even the other MonsterVerse films, I would say. But still, Godzilla 2014, it has things to like in it, but overall, I'd say it's easily one of the weaker Godzilla films. So, lastly, honestly, I would say that this is easily the worst Godzilla movie, and that is Godzilla's Revenge, also known as All Monsters Attack. This movie, it's not really good. It's not really that good, to be honest. I mean, the movie is cringy. It's just super lame. I mean, I'm not going to say that the movie is boring. It's just cringy to watch, and you're like, what the heck am I watching? Like, you even have Godzilla's son in this movie talking, like actually speaking in this movie. Like, hey, hello there, I'm over here. You know, it's like, what am I even watching right now? Like, I thought that was really stupid. I don't know why they went in that direction. I mean, I know they kind of did the same thing, you know, with the whole, like, the monsters, like, speaking in, like, other films to an extent, but I felt like they really overdone it with this film. And it just comes off as super cringe. I mean, the movie is more cringe than anything. And it's just not really that great, to be honest. So, yeah, All Monsters Attack, easily the worst Godzilla movie ever made. I would say stay away from this one. Yeah, again, it's the worst Godzilla movie. And I know a lot of you would agree with me on that. Even when I first watched this movie, I'm like, the cast is not interesting. I'm not really that interested in the characters. Like, there's a lot of, like, really weird moments in the movie. Like, the plot's really weird. You know, there's a lot of, like, WTF moments. Like, what the heck is going on here, you know? It's just not really that good. I mean, I'm sure I could find things to like about the film, but all in all, it's not that great of a movie, especially for a Godzilla movie. It's not really that great. So, All Monsters Attack, aka Godzilla's Revenge, it's easily the worst. It's the worst. So, let me know what you think. What are, in your opinion, the worst Godzilla movies? Particularly your top 5, in your opinion, the top 5 worst Godzilla movies. Feel free to let me know what you think. What did you think of this top 5? So with that said, thank you for watching. Have a good one.